Discover how discovering a $70,000 lie unveiled an incredible path to freedom and a new life. Emily Thompson sighed, leaning against the attic beam that held the weight of her father's secrets. Dust particles danced in the fading light filtering through the window, their quiet spirals mocking the chaos that churned within her. Buried under layers of old newspapers and forgotten memories was a ledger, its cracked spine promising untold truths. She held her breath, fingering the brittle pages, every flip igniting a flicker of hope and dread. What if this were the moment her life changed? Yet, instinctively, she felt a sinking sensation, as if the air had thickened around her, and Owen in Hudson Grove saw her aching struggle, not among the locals who greeted her with polite nods while she pored over charts and bandaged wounds. They simply regarded her as the town nurse, an unassuming presence in scrubs, a far cry from the legacy her father had envisioned for her. The whispers of her father's failures, that his dreams had succumbed to debt and despair, had cast a long shadow over her life. She struggled day in and day out, frequently glancing at her 8-year-old son, Jake, his infectious laughter pinching at her heart. Did he deserve a mother fettered by fear? Breaking that cycle felt like an impossible dream. She turned another page of the ledger. Her heart raced. $70,000. The number felt both thrilling and monstrous. This money, her father's hidden inheritance, could pull her away from the suffocating life she led, and yet, she questioned whether she had the right to claim it. It wasn't merely money. It was a painful reminder of her father's tarnished past, of the judgment that awaited her if she stepped into the light. Would this inheritance redeem her family or bind her to the very narrative that had filled her childhood with shame? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. The moment she confessed her discovery to herself, a chilling wave of judgment washed over her. Town elites, the very people who had scoffed at her for years, would relish watching her scurry back to her miserable existence if she dared claim what was rightfully hers. Their disdain, mingled with envy, would tighten like a noose, each gossip further burying her with doubt. Emily envisioned their smirks, those familiar faces that had no problem judging her choices and her worth, all while draped in the finery of privilege. With Jake depending on her, Emily felt every burden intensify. The stakes felt higher than ever, a tumultuous struggle between honoring her father's shadowy legacy and stepping into the light she yearned for. Each decision loomed like a fork in the road. Her mind raced, muscles tensed as she faced the gnawing question: how could one small-town nurse possibly rewrite her family's story? As hushed whispers began to circulate through Hudson Grove, with her every move under scrutiny, Emily stood before a precipice. Would stepping forward bring a new beginning, or would it plunge her deeper into the legacy of despair and failure? The pressure mounted, tightening around her throat like a steel band, and just when she felt she could break free, doubt phased into paralyzing fear. Emily was torn at the seams, wrestling with the complexity of her identity while desperately striving for a sense of belonging. The room around her felt smaller, the air thicker, as she fought against the rising tide of doubt. In that attic, buried beneath the past, she confronted her choices, the weight of an inheritance ready to either uplift her or drag her into unrelenting darkness. The ledger was more than a gateway to freedom. It was a mirror reflecting everything she had worked so hard to overcome. She gripped it tightly. The answer lay within her reach, but would she have the courage to follow it? Emily's heart drummed against her ribs as she turned the page of the ledger again. Each carefully scripted entry echoed her father's ambitions, whispers of a future he had envisioned but never realized. Would she find courage in those words, or was she merely resurrecting the ghosts of a buried past? As she scanned the columns filled with numbers and faded ink, doubt clawed at her thoughts. Was her path really inexorably linked to mistakes that were not her own? deep breaths. She needed clarity. Closing her eyes, she considered Jake's bright grin. He was her anchor, grounding her in this maelstrom of legacies. He deserved a mother who fought for a better life, not for the shadows of failure. She had coasted long enough, believing the lie that she was simply a caretaker, a cast-off in her father's narrative. But if she claimed this inheritance, would she finally step out of that mold? Maneuvering the ledger aside, Emily paced the cramped attic, her mind a whirlwind of possibilities. She rattled off potential uses for the money, tossing them into the air like stones into a pond. A down payment on a house of their own. Savings for Jake's education. Just the thought of those outcomes ignited a fire inside her. But then the thought twisted. What if it all went wrong? What if the money was entangled in debts, legal battles, or, worst of all, the judgment of Hudson Grove? Emily could almost hear the whispers, "Now, did you really think you could escape?" Each word seemed to ebb and flow through her mind, an internal struggle of intrepid dreams versus paralyzing fears. With her heart racing and palms sweaty, she eased herself onto the floor, leaning against the attic wall. The coolness of the wooden beams contrasted her rapidly warming insides. It was there, against that wall, that a realization struck her like lightning. She couldn't afford to let fear shepherd her actions. Fear was simply the narrative her upbringing had scripted for her. No longer could she allow her father's failures to define her. Instead, she could take this chance to transform the script. This inheritance could allow her to craft a new life not just for herself, but for Jake. That thought blossomed into determination. She needed to take the first steps toward understanding what this money truly meant. Emily pulled herself up, visions of her future unfurling at her feet like a freshly paved road. She decided she would seek out advice. Maybe a financial planner, someone who could show her how to harness this inheritance wisely and responsibly. She could gather information, make an informed decision, and not let fear cloud her judgment. As she descended the attic stairs, the ledger tucked safely under her arm, she felt a subtle shift within her. No longer a passive observer of her life, she could choose to engage. She could forge alliances, seek clarity, and craft a life of her choosing. But then a thought struck her and slowed her momentum, a memory of her father warning her to tread lightly with money. Would consulting a professional invite unwanted drama into her life? For a moment, her resolve faltered, but she angrily squashed it. Anxiety still hung over her like a shadow, yet in that moment, Emily glimpsed something previously obscured in the dimness. She had a right to aspire, to dream, and ultimately, to claim her legacy. Stepping through the front door and into the sunlight felt like a rebirth, freshly alive with potential. She was no longer only the small-town nurse. She was Emma Thompson, daughter of a flawed man, but also a woman ready to write her own narrative, unshackled by the past. The journey ahead was uncertain, but it was hers to navigate. Yet just as she breathed in the freedom of her newfound determination, the weight of caution flickered back. How would she confront the town now? Would they respect her choices, or would they shun her for daring to rise above? The specter of judgment loomed larger than ever, demanding acknowledgement. The moment of confrontation was drawing nearer, and as she walked forward, she knew something had to change.
Would
she possess the strength to hurdle the biases into which she was born? Emily's mind was a complex tapestry of thoughts as she navigated the streets of Hudson Grove. The sun hung high in the sky, illuminating her path yet casting long shadows that danced with her fears. She clutched the ledger tightly, feeling the weight of her father's legacy pressing against her chest. Each step seemed to echo her internal conflict, secure in her newfound resolve, yet haunted by the specter of doubt. Once back home, she placed the ledger on the kitchen table, its pages flaring open like wounded wings. The place felt strangely buoyant, almost alive with possibility, yet suffocating under unseen pressures. Emily took a deep breath, pacing the small kitchen. Jake's laughter drifted in from the living room, a promise of joy that fueled her determination. She could not let her insecurities dictate their happiness. Glancing at her phone, Emily hesitated before dialing the number of a financial planner she had found online. The prospect of discussing her inheritance felt akin to peeling back layers of vulnerability she had long shielded from. Yet, it also symbolized an act of empowerment, a decisive choice to gain control over her destiny rather than drift passively in trepidation. She had anticipated a straightforward conversation about assets, but once the planner's voice chimed through the receiver, a torrent of questions cascaded into her mind. Would he gauge her worth based on her father's failures? Would he view her as just another cog in the cycle of ineptitude? Taking a deep breath, she fought against the rising tide of anxiety, reminding herself of her intent to understand, to evolve. As she reached out, she found herself warily navigating this new terrain. She needed to approach discussions with the confidence she had begun to cultivate, not as a woman shackled by her lineage, but as a mother intent on crafting a solid future for her son. Her voice, steady yet tinged with nervous energy, surprised her as she articulated her needs. Every word felt like armor, shielding her from the ghosts that had long haunted her family. Over the next days, the planner presented various strategies and insights, but each topic seemed steeped in complexities that tested her resolve. He pulled out charts, spreadsheets, and projections while discussing investments and tax implications. Emily fought against the urge to retreat, to let her fears drown out his explanations. Instead, she leaned in. Every nugget of information felt like an opportunity to empower herself. Eventually, one detail troubled her deeply. Hidden debts tied to her father's ventures lurked in the shadows of the financial discussions, a truth nestled in the corners of the planner's spreadsheets. What had once felt like an escape now appeared riddled with the remnants of her father's misjudgments. Anger bubbled from within her at the thought of his choices continuing to dictate her life. Yet, instead of retreating, she felt something shift, of fierce resilience unfurling like wings ready to take flight. Emily vowed to tackle this tangled web of mismanagement with ferocity. What if she could embrace this legacy not as a burden, but a challenge to redefine? The anger morphed into fuel, forging her determination even stronger. She could dismantle the financial chains that bound her and Jake. However, her resolve to assert control clashed violently with apprehensions of what lay ahead. Confronting the realities of her father's decisions and their implications was daunting. How would she unearth the truth without entangling herself further in his failures? The town's judgment loomed, a specter that could halt her momentum. But Emily knew she was no longer simply reeling from her father's past. She was ready to dissect it. The path to liberation involved taking ownership not just of the inheritance, but of herself. As she stood again in the attic, gazing out at the horizon stretching before her, she sensed a palpable change. She wasn't just reclaiming her family legacy. She was about to redefine her identity, to stand firm where once she had sulked. And as she breathed deeply, vibrant possibilities fluttered in her chest. There was one last piece of the puzzle to confront, the secrets hidden within her father's financial dealings. Would unraveling this financial mystery ultimately lead to her redemption, or would it risk everything she had just begun to claim? The thought ignited a fire within her, and the time to act was fast approaching. The attic brimmed with dust and echoes, remnants of a life that felt both familiar and foreign. Emily remained rooted to the spot, a singular thought reverberating in her mind. She needed to know the truth about her father's financial entanglements, the labyrinthine web that had ensnared her family for years. For too long, they had existed in the shadows of unspoken expectations and unfulfilled dreams. Determined, she pushed through the layers of nostalgia and resentment that clouded her vision. Each box and forgotten artifact in the attic became a beacon for her search, not merely for financial clarity, but for personal liberation. She needed to peel away the layers of deceit and understand the choices that had stood between her and a future unfettered by her father's failures. With a notebook she had kept during her conversations with the planner in one hand, she seized an empty box from the corner of the attic, ready to sift through her family's remnants. As she excavated items, each object a tarnished trophy, a photo of her father laughing with friends pulled memories to the forefront, yet they all took a backseat to a more pressing objective. One particularly fragile ledger caught her attention. The pages crinkled beneath her fingers, giving way to the scent of aged paper and secrets. Neither the planner nor her father had revealed the full scope of his troubles, but this artifact could be the key. Carefully, she flipped through its contents, revealing transactions that sparked confusion and anger alike. As figures danced before her, a chilling realization surfaced. Her father had engaged in a pattern of borrowing that led to a debt of $70,000, a towering sum that could engulf her if she didn't confront it head-on. It was no longer just a matter of navigating her inheritance. It became a personal reckoning. How had he let it spiral out of control? And why did he leave this burden for her to find? The weight of the discovery settled heavy in the pit of her stomach, yet anger intertwined with resolve. This knowledge could either chain her to her father's mistakes or empower her to forge a new path. Drawing on the revelations she'd unearthed, she began mapping a strategy. She wouldn't shy away from this debt. Rather, she would confront it with the fierce determination she had awakened. She could seek legal advice, explore negotiation options with creditors, or even consider appealing for financial assistance. In those moments, clarity emerged from the chaos. She wasn't merely carrying the weight of her father's legacy. She was learning to navigate the intricacies of adulthood, motherhood, and responsibility. The more she learned about financial literacy, the more capable she felt, like a sculptor chiseling away at marble to reveal a masterpiece hidden within. But with each strategy she formulated, burgeoning doubts pricked at her mind. Had she truly prepared herself for the inevitable judgment from Hudson Grove? Would her efforts to disentangle herself from her father's shadows be viewed as an embarrassment or a triumph? The questions loomed like storm clouds, threatening to overshadow her newly sparked determination. Standing in the attic, with the ledger ultimately contained within the box of heirlooms, Emily realized that she needed allies in this fight. Reaching out to the financial planner wasn't enough. She needed a support network. Perhaps she could forge connections with others in similar financial distress, learn from their experiences, and share her journey. As she turned to leave the attic, a jolt of adrenaline rushed through her veins. The unknown stretched before her, daunting yet thrilling. She had awakened not just the fighter within herself, but also the strategist, one ready to dissect the past and dismantle its grip. What lay ahead required her to seek out those she could trust, possibly even opening dialogues with people in Hudson Grove she had once deemed adversaries. The realization struck her with clarity. If she was hardened enough to expose the truth, perhaps others would join her. With that thought igniting her spirit, Emily stepped into the sunlight filtering through the attic window. Would she find the support she needed, or would fear stifle her newly forged determination? The next steps loomed, both terrifying and exhilarating, ready to be taken in pursuit of her freedom. The sunlight flooded the hallway as Emily descended from the attic, invigorated yet apprehensive. Each step felt like a declaration of intent, a commitment to confront the shadows of her father's choices. She paused briefly at the top of the staircase, weighing her options. The weight of the ledger lay heavy in her suitcase-like heart, but beneath it pulsed a new awareness of personal agency. Determined to act, she pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts, hesitating over names that had once merely filled a list. She needed not just any conversation, but the right conversations, those that would carve out a path through the dense fog of debt that had enveloped her life. Finally, she tapped on Rachel's contact, a fellow single mother who had found herself in a similar financial quagmire. The phone rang, and as the familiar voice filled her ear, a spark ignited inside her. Emily had often found solace in Rachel's resilience. Their discussions about parenting had often turned into exchanges of strategies for surviving their respective financial struggles. But this conversation would take a different turn. "Hey, Rachel. I could use some advice," Emily began, her voice steady but infused with urgency. As she opened up about the ledger and the daunting sum her father left behind, she could hear Rachel's thoughts clicking into place. An unbreakable bond of shared experience formed in that moment. "I went through something similar when my husband left," Rachel admitted. "There's power in community. You're not alone in this." Those words resonated deeply. They ignited a flicker of hope that illuminated the path ahead. She discussed the importance of building her own network, not just of allies but of those who understood the weight and the liberation that came with debt recovery. Rachel's experience had taught her about local groups offering financial literacy workshops, support networks, and resources. I'll send you links to the meetings and forums. You have to get out there. Find your people, Rachel insisted, her voice trailing warmth. As Emily hung up, she felt a pulse of excitement. This wasn't just about finding help. It was evolving into a quest for empowerment. She realized that reclaiming her own narrative required gathering knowledge and weaving it with the experiences of others. She began plotting a route through the labyrinth, determined to attend the meetings and connect with those ready to rise against their circumstances. Every face she would meet might carry a story not unlike her own, each one a potential thread in her tapestry of transformation. The thought fueled her determination as she composed emails to local financial organizations, inquiring about workshops and seminars. Each click of a key felt like she was chiseling away at the walls that had confined her for too long. But in the back of her mind echoed the worry of judgment. Each meeting could expose her vulnerabilities, lay bare her father's mistakes for strangers to dissect. Would they regard her efforts as admirable? Or would she face scorn as another victim of financial mismanagement? She silenced the doubts. They were merely shadows she could choose to ignore. As she scrolled through online forums, she stumbled upon a message thread discussing practical tips for negotiating debts. One thread caught her attention: my journey of rebuilding credit after $50,000 in debt. The boldness of others resonated with her, awakening her fight. If they could confront their battles, so could she. The decision was made. She would not only prevail against her father's legacy, but would rise in her own right. Emily began listing strategies for the first meeting she planned to attend. Preparation would be her armor. Knowledge would brook no intimidation. Just as she gathered her notes, her phone buzzed again with a message from Rachel. By the way, I believe there's a meetup for financial recovery happening next week. Let us go together. The unread messages threaded possibilities, binding her to this moment she had conjured through courage and resilience. A smile curled on Emily's lips as she set her plan in motion, a thirst for growth bubbling within her. Yet, as she prepared for her first step into this new world, she couldn't escape the lurking sense of doubt. Would she really be able to face her father's financial scars, or was she inviting a deeper wound into her life? With resolved determination but a flicker of uncertainty, she pressed send on her RSVP to the meetup. The next chapter awaited were the discoveries ahead poised to empower her, or could they lay bare mental and emotional scars she hadn't yet confronted? The days leading to the meetup felt both exhilarating and suffocating. Emily oscillated between anticipation and anxiety, her mind churning with what-ifs. She immersed herself in research, budgeting strategies, negotiation tactics, stories of triumph that echoed her own struggles. Each new insight turned into another piece of armor, but the fear of vulnerability lingered like a cloud. Standing in front of the mirror on the day of the meeting, she examined her reflection. She had chosen a simple navy blouse, neat jeans, and a light jacket that lent her an air of professionalism she seldom embraced. Would this be enough? What if she faltered when faced with questions that demanded more than mere expressions of resolve? She needed to be assertive, yet the shadows of doubt were always there, nipping at her sense of confidence. As she stepped out, the world felt different, no longer a place filled with reminders of her father's failures, but an arena where she could rewrite her story. The drive to the community center was filled with an unsettling mix of adrenaline and trepidation. The buildings lining the street blurred past, giving way to a feeling of sudden clarity. This moment was hers, and it was time to seize it. When she arrived, the center's warm lighting contrasted with the cool breeze outside. A low buzz of conversation warmed the air, and as Emily stepped inside, the sound enveloped her like a comforting blanket. She surveyed the room, filled with familiar faces numbed by struggle and intimate expressions of determination. The array of individuals gathered around small tables spoke to her heart. Each person seemed to carry their own burdens, but also glimpses of hope. Emily. Rachel's enthusiastic wave drew her attention. breaking the icy grip of anxiety that threatened to consume her. Returning the smile, the two made their way through the mingling crowd, murmuring greetings and introductions. Emily's palms felt clammy but steadied as she listened to others share their experiences. These were not stories of shame, but badges of survival. For the first time, she recognized her own journey as part of a broader narrative. As the meeting commenced, the facilitator introduced strategies that went beyond navigating debt. They touched on self-worth, resilience, and financial health. Each word resonated with Emily, lifting the weight of her father's choices off her shoulders. She scribbled notes feverishly, feeling fragments of her identity emerge. She was not merely a victim. During an intermission, Emily hesitated over a table where pamphlets nested among free coffee cups. A bold title on one particularly caught her eye: Finding Your Financial Voice. She reached for it, and a soft glance met hers, a woman across the table, slightly older, with a welcoming smile. "That one changed everything for me," she said, her eyes reflecting an understanding that transcended words. "Oh, how so?" Emily inquired, her curiosity overcoming her pervasive doubts. The woman leaned in, recounting how her initial fears about tackling her debt had transformed into a leverage point for growth. "It's about owning your story," she said, "not letting it define you." Something clicked in Emily's mind, a realization that perhaps the ledger wasn't the only thing she needed to confront. It demanded courage to redefine her connection to her father's choices, to recognize the lie of helplessness she had been told her entire life. This brief exchange ignited a flame inside her. There would be no more hiding. The meeting pressed on, and when it came time for open dialogue, Emily took a leap. "I need to face my father's legacy," she shared, her voice filling the room with an energy she hadn't anticipated. "I want to reclaim my life, but I fear what others will think." With that admission, a wave of camaraderie surged through the gathered group. Voices chimed in, sharing personal anecdotes, each story weaving into a tapestry of shared struggle. The collective wisdom, seasoned with hard-earned lessons, began to brew a potent cocktail of empowerment. But nestled beneath her newfound strength lay another unsettling realization. As she opened herself to collaboration and support, she couldn't help but wonder, what would she discover about her father and herself if she fully unearthed the depths of his past? As the meeting drew to a close, Emily felt a thrilling pulse of resolve coursing through her. She readied herself to face whatever discoveries awaited her, but also the daunting shadows she still had yet to confront. With new connections forming around her, the next step loomed ever closer. The truth behind the $70,000 debt and who had truly held the reins of her father's financial decisions. The next morning, Emily awoke with a sense of electrifying anticipation. The revelations from the meeting lingered in her mind like a fresh spark. She poured herself a cup of coffee, the rich aroma infusing her thoughts with energy. The sunlight slanted through her kitchen window, casting long shadows that reminded her of both the burdens of her past and the promise of her future. It was time to dig deeper. Armed with a notepad and renewed conviction, Emily sat at her kitchen table and began making a plan, a guide to uncover the truths hidden within her father's financial history. Numbers always confused her, a chaotic blend of fear and misunderstanding. But today, determined to reclaim her own narrative, she shifted her mindset. She would view the investigation not as a burden but as an opportunity to better understand the choices made in her family's shadowed past. Her first step: research. Emily opened her laptop and pulled up her father's old financial documents. It felt invasive, unearthing the relics of a life that had been marred by secrecy and shame, but she pressed on. In those pages, she expected cold numbers. Instead, she found haunting reminders dive into the details of warnings left unheeded, loans taken with desperation, and fruitless investments that promised a quick fix to maintain appearances. Familiar dread settled in the pit of her stomach, but she fought against it. As she scrutinized each line item, a revelation flickered. She was not simply a bystander in her father's mistakes. These debts were more than a family embarrassment. They were clues to understanding the man who had shaped her reality, yet remained a stranger in many ways. After hours of sifting through papers, Emily unearthed a particularly alarming discrepancy. Her father had taken out a second mortgage shortly before his death, an impulsive decision that seemed to coincide with some pivotal, undisclosed events. Seeking clarity, she reached out to contacts who had known him during that time. They might hold pieces of the puzzle she desperately needed to complete the picture. With each phone call, she was met with cautious encouragement. Her father had been well-liked but also pitted for his struggles. Conversations painted a portrait of a man trapped by his own choices, and yet, Emily also sensed a flicker of admiration in their voices and acknowledgement of his attempts to provide for his family, even if the methods were misguided. She began to grapple with the complexity of his legacy, which thrummed against her newly burgeoning sense of self. As night fell, Emily felt a strange mixture of sadness and clarity washing over her. This emotional unraveling ignited a powerful sense of agency inside her. No longer did she wish to only understand her father's debts. She craved to transform that understanding into her own mastery over financial responsibility. What intuitive tools had been buried beneath years of shame? Perhaps her father had hidden wisdom within his mistakes. Fueled by her growing resolve, she dove into online courses for financial literacy, eager to decode the language of budgeting and investment. Each module opened new doors to her growth, offering insights that challenged her fears and preconceptions. She felt a sense of liberation that had been sorely missing. Money no longer felt like an uncontrollable beast. It became a tool for growth and empowerment. As the intensive study came to a close, she set her sights on the next crucial step, uncovering the motivations behind her father's decisions. Who had influenced him and why? She would need to confront the people who had been part of his life to fully understand the pressures he faced. But even as she grew in knowledge and confidence, the question gnawed at her. What if her search led to personal demons, her father's failures that mirrored her own insecurities? Confronting his truth could also mean wrestling with parts of herself she'd rather not face. With every ounce of resolve, she prepared to dig deeper into her father's past, determined to separate the myths from reality. The whispered legacies of inadequacy remained, but Emily was resolute. She would untangle this web, no matter the cost. The moment of discovery was drawing near. Would her search liberate her, or bind her to uncharted pain? The thrill of both potential outcomes surged through her, igniting an even greater sense of urgency. Emily's journey to confront not just her father's legacy, but her own rapidly approached its test. The shadows of fear lay ahead, but so too did the extraordinary potential for autonomy. Would she find the truth wrapped in the legacy of debt, or something more profound buried beneath? The following day, Emily's determination drove her deeper into the investigation. Armed with her notes and an unwavering focus, she returned to her father's old friends, anxious to discover the connections that had influenced his choices. Each conversation turned into a mini exploration of her dad's life, a life that had once merely seemed distant and enigmatic. Now, it felt like uncharted territory ripe for exploration. Meeting with Rebecca, her father's longtime business partner, was both a thrill and a source of trepidation. Emily felt a rush of adrenaline as she navigated through the remnants of her father's past. Sitting across from a woman who had shared laughs and late nights with him stirred an urgency in her. She opened with a cautious, "I'm trying to piece together who my father was during that time financially and personally." Rebecca's gaze softened with an unusual mix of nostalgia and sorrow. "Your father was a brilliant man, Emily, but he was plagued by his desire to prove himself. The business we ran was successful, yet he always worried it wasn't enough. It was never just about the money for him. It was about respect. You have to understand that." Her words resonated deeply with Emily, like a missing note in a haunting melody finally struck. Respect. She recognized that echo in her own pursuits and ambitions. It fueled her professional enhancements, yet it also shadowed her decisions. This duality sparked an internal realization she had to carve her identity free from the perceptions rooted in her father's legacy. What was it about the second mortgage? Emily pressed, her heart pounding in anticipation of a revelation. Rebecca hesitated before answering. He was invested in a venture, something promising but risky. He thought he could turn the business around, regain control. But instead, it brought him down. The pressure was immense. Emily's mind raced. There was again the narrative of independence turning towards desperation. Could it be that her father had also been driven by the very societal norms she had been fighting against? She sensed an undeniable connection between their experiences, marked by fear of inadequacy and overwhelming responsibility. After their meeting, Emily found herself in deep contemplation. The conversations acted as mirror reflections, revealing how closely intertwined her trajectory was with her father's misguided choices. They didn't just exist as separate entities, but rather as two pieces of a shattered puzzle, her own insecurities magnifying the shadows of his mistakes. Feeling the weight of their parallel lives, she glanced at her reflection in a cafe window, an image of vulnerability mixed with burgeoning strength. She needed to confront the very demons that pestered her fear of failure and her compulsion to achieve what others expected of her. A voice within insisted that her father's pursuits, marred with regrets, echoed in her quest for validation. Determined to break this cycle, Emily focused on her newfound financial skills. She meticulously outlined a personal budget she could actually stick to, recognizing that this was about more than just numbers. It was her chance to redefine her worth without falling prey to the same pitfalls. As the days passed, online forums and group discussions surrounding financial literacy became her refuge. The more she engaged, the more she noticed others sharing their own stories of liberation and regret. Each contributed piece reinforced a burgeoning belief that she was not alone. Those who learned from their legacies could transform pain into empowerment. But just when she felt a surge of confidence, an ominous doubt crept in. What if her commitment opened doors she wasn't ready to confront? The prospect of unveiling her father's partners or seeking out lingering debts sent a shiver down her spine. In an attempt to center herself and gather courage, Emily made a list of all the individuals she needed to reach out to. Each name felt weighted with significance. They represented answers, but also risks. The moment had come for her to face the truth of her father's final decisions. In doing so, she was not only desperate for clarity, but also standing at the precipice of her own fears. Who would she become in the reckoning of this journey? The decision loomed large. Should she delve deeper, uncover the remaining secrets, or pull back, preserving the fragile sense of clarity she had finally grasped? The choice felt intertwined with her growth. As she sat, pen hovering over the names on her list, she couldn't shake the feeling that destiny was nudging her gently yet firmly. Was she standing on the edge of monumental discovery or entrapment in the past? The next step awaited finding out if she was ready for the truth, or if it would enchain her even further. Emily felt the weight of the decision pressed against her chest like a heavy stone. The names on the list seemed to swirl in her mind, each one pulsating with the potential for truth, but also the possibility of deeper shadows. Each name represented a thread to her father's past that could connect her more intimately to his life, or draw her deeper into the quagmire of regret and untold stories. The moment stretched, and she found herself questioning her very identity. Had she become more akin to her father than she had ever imagined? A rush of frustration, mixed with fear, surged through her. The twin desires embracing her father's legacy and fiercely forging her own path clashed violently within her. With a determined breath, Emily grasped the pen and made her choice to reach out to Jake, one of her father's old friends who had been noticeably absent from conversations until now. She remembered Jake as a man who would tell stories that made her laugh, whose easygoing demeanor masked a sharp wit. His knowledge of her father's ventures could be invaluable, but she also felt a pang of apprehension at the thought of bending him to a purpose that felt both vindictive and necessary, a desire for clarity veiled in a desperate need for closure. The phone call felt surreal as she dialed his number. When his voice greeted her, warm yet tinged with confusion, Emily's stomach fluttered. "Jake, it's Emily," she began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I've been learning more about my dad's past, and I need your help." His tone shifted instantly to a more serious shade. "Of course, Emily. What do you need?" The conversation flowed freely, her questions punctuated by Jake's brief stories of better times, the moments of brilliance, and the laughter they shared. But as she pushed deeper into the financial matters, asking about the business ventures and debts, she could hear the hesitance in his voice. "Your dad had dreams, you know? He wanted to expand, but—" Jake hesitated. Sometimes dreams come with consequences, especially when the choices are driven by desperation rather than clarity. With each word, the realization struck Emily harder. Her father had been a product of his ambitions and fears, and in many ways, she stood fragilely on the same precipice. The challenge of breaking cycles echoed ferociously in her ears, each moment illuminating her internal struggle more violently. After ending the call, she took a moment to reflect. Jake's warning reverberated through her mind. Despite her burgeoning financial skills, how much of her own drive was still tangled in ancient familial desires for respect and success? She decided to go out for a walk, needing space to breathe away from the intensity of her thoughts. The sun hung low in the sky, casting elongated shadows on the pavement. With each step, she wrestled fiercely with herself. The concept of managing her finances felt burdensome as it revealed truths the job was not merely about numbers, but about confronting one's self-doubt and old ghosts. What was she willing to sacrifice in order to forge a path of her own that diverged from her father's legacy? This question would not leave her. With each stride, determination blossomed into clarity. Soon, she would confront more than just her father's past. She would need to face herself, the insecurities and ambitions that had built her identity. As she returned home, a new sense of purpose unfurled within her. Tomorrow would bring new revelations, but she had a secret agenda of her own. It was time to dig deeper, and also to carve out spaces within herself, undeniable and genuine, that could withstand whatever truth surfaced. The next name on her list loomed larger than the others. Rebecca. Would Rebecca's stories bring her further insights or deeper doubts? Would Emily be ready to confront not just her father's choices, but how those choices reflected her own aspirations and anxieties? Sitting in her small kitchen, Emily Thompson stared at a financial report she had labored over for days with a sense of triumphant clarity. The initial dread surrounding her father's legacy of debt had transformed into an actionable plan, one rooted in resolution rather than fear. No longer was she just the town nurse, haunted by her father's past. She had evolved into a woman committed to redefining her family's narrative, not merely surviving but thriving in the face of challenges. Over coffee that morning, she found herself contemplating the connections she had forged during her journey, a network of supporters and fellow survivors, each journey intertwined with hers, but framed by unique struggles. With every conversation and every kind word from her peers, doubts dissipated. They had transformed from whispering fears into a clear chorus of strength and acknowledgement that she was not alone. Having navigated countless meetings, Emily was now set for a pivotal one. Armed with copies of her father's convoluted debt history, she scheduled an appointment with Rebecca, hoping to extract further insights from her father's past. The prospect excited and terrified her simultaneously. Could understanding her father's failures lead her to even deeper revelations about herself? It was a dual-edged sword, the potential for empowerment paralleled by the risk of reliving past trauma. As Emily entered Rebecca's office, she felt a rush of nostalgia and spirit. This was the woman who remembered her father as more than just a man consumed by his financial demons. She found comfort in the shared history. As they settled into the small office, the trust between them forged a bridge toward understanding. Your father always aimed for greatness, but perhaps it was that very desire that led him astray, Rebecca began. Her words lit a spark of recognition within Emily. There it was, the echo of their shared ambition that had spurred both dreamers into the unknown labyrinth of choice. Emily's heart raced. The clarity she waited for emerged when Rebecca continued. He was grappling with a fine line of ambition. The question is, what will you choose to do with the inheritance he left behind? With each insight thrumming through her, Emily began to dissect the map of her life. The father she had idolized was indeed flawed, but in his imperfections lay lessons waiting to be seized. Not just about finances, but about the intricacies of human aspirations and limitations. Resolutely, Emily felt a familiar strength pulse within her. She could prove to herself that she was a steward of her destiny. After an illuminating discussion, armed with new perspectives and actionable insights, Emily left Rebecca's office, the morning sun sparking hope within her heart. The shadows that once loomed with judgment had dimmed, replaced with a refreshing sense of clarity. She was empowered, ready to reclaim her father's legacy, bold enough to shape it anew. Days turned into weeks filled with new developments. Empowered by connections with her support group, Emily immersed herself in financial literacy, absorbing crucial knowledge that transformed fear into confidence. A consistent budgeting plan emerged, one that would shelter her from financial pitfalls. The milestones were significant: the first savings account set for Jake's education, a carefully established budget that prioritized essentials over extravagance. Each achievement built her confidence, gradually transforming her identity. As she instilled these values in her life, the once overpowering weight of her father's debts diminished, evolving into moments of honest reflection. Conversations around the dinner table shifted from fear to hope. She encouraged Jake to dream confidently, to embrace his own ambitions unencumbered by guilt or shame. The final piece of the puzzle came one fateful afternoon when she decided to host a small gathering for her support group. She shared her story, weaving together the journey of revelation and growth, and concluded with a pledge to rise above the repetitive cycle of financial despair. Our past does not define us. Our choices moving forward do. As she looked around the room, she recognized a profound sense of solidarity. Each person resonated with the transformative power of choosing to act rather than react. That day marked not just a personal triumph, but a community gathering that celebrated empowerment, the very spirit she yearned for. Emily stood firm, knowing that expressing vulnerabilities led to collective strength, even mending the fabric of her past, woven with the love of her son and newfound clarity. With the weight of her father's legacy lifted, Emily reveled in a newly defined future. Freedom enveloped her like a warm embrace. The story had transitioned from the shadows of debt to the brightness of opportunity. This is at the moment of your own awakening awaits. Don't let fear and hesitation trap you. It's time to seize your life. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and show your support. Comment your thoughts and theories about this Ending Your Engagement Matters. And share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to experience this transformational journey. Don't wait even one more second. You need to elevate the narrative.